I'm Diane. Sitting on the peak of my house, the sunset painting the sky in a deep, bruised purple, I look at my hands, stained with roof tar. They're rough but steady, a far cry from the shaking mess they were just a few weeks ago. I've just deposited an $80,000 check from my former employer, money that's not just for my family's financial relief but for the long-awaited sense of justice. I've been in the industrial air filtration sales game for 15 years. It's not the most glamorous job, but it pays the bills. I work for Airscape Solutions, a company that was once family-owned by Mr. Thompson. He was a kind-hearted man, like a father figure to me. He knew all about my family. My son, Caleb, is a sophomore in medical school, and the tuition fees are a constant source of stress. Mr. Thompson understood that my old station wagon was still on the road because I prioritized my mortgage and Caleb's education over getting a fancy new car. But then, things took a turn for the worse. Mr. Thompson retired and sold the company to a private equity firm based in a sleek skyscraper in another city. Within a month, the warm, cooperative atmosphere in the office vanished. The free, high-quality coffee in the break room was replaced by a vending machine that served bitter, overpriced sludge. Everyone in the office became tense and silent, constantly on edge. Shortly after the acquisition, they sent us a new regional director named Ryan. He's 28 years old, always wearing suits that are a bit too trendy and speaking in corporate jargon that means nothing. He has no idea how an air filter works and doesn't seem to care. To him, we're just numbers on a spreadsheet. One of his annoying habits is that whenever he's annoyed or trying to show off, he'll tug at the corner of his tie until it's all wrinkled. I tried to stay away from him, keeping my head down, aligning my notebooks on my desk, and making my sales calls. My sales territory is the heavy industrial sector. Think steel mills, chemical plants, places that smell like a mix of sulfur and grease. It's tough selling. You can't just charm these clients, you have to know your product inside out and show up prepared, wearing sturdy work boots, not designer shoes. The trouble started around October. I'd been working on a lead for 6 months. A large pharmaceutical manufacturing plant just outside the city needed to upgrade its entire air filtration system to meet new environmental regulations. It was a huge project, worth $1.3 million. According to my contract, which I'd signed 4 years ago and had been honored until then, I'd get a base salary and a 3% commission on gross sales. But if the sales exceeded $1 million, the commission would jump to 4%. This was an incentive to go for the big deals. I did the math one night at the kitchen table. 4% of $1.3 million would be $52,000. After taxes, it would not only pay off Caleb's remaining tuition for the year but also fix the leaky roof that had been driving me crazy since last winter. This wasn't just about the money, it was about peace of mind, the ability to sleep through the night without worrying about debts. I worked my tail off on this deal. I visited the plant 15 times, walked the factory floor with their facility manager, a no-nonsense woman named Grace. I measured the ductwork myself, sat in countless meetings, and redlined blueprints until my eyes could barely focus. Meanwhile, Ryan was of no help at all. One afternoon, he leaned against my cubicle, tugging at his tie. "Diane, why is this taking so long? You're wasting company resources. Just give them a 15% discount and close the deal." I looked up from my work and said calmly, "If I give that discount, we'll lose the margin and the higher commission." Grace isn't looking for a discount, she wants a reliable system. Ryan scoffed, "Trust doesn't pay the rent. Volume does. You old-timers are too cautious." He walked away, leaving behind a strong smell of his expensive cologne. I ignored him. I knew Grace well enough to know that if I offered a discount too early, she'd think our product was of low quality. I held my ground. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Grace called me. Her voice was gruff but excited. "Diane, you've won. The board has approved the budget. Send over the final contract." I hung up the phone and sat there for a while, just taking in the news. The office was quiet, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I picked up my pen, a smooth-capped Mont Blanc that I'd had for years, and clicked it once. It was a solid, reassuring sound. I prepared the paperwork carefully, double-checking every figure. The total contract value was $1,280,000, and my commission came out to be $51,200. I submitted the signed contract to the billing department and saw my name and the big number on the sales log update on the shared server. An hour later, Ryan walked by my desk. He stopped, looked at the screen, then at me. He didn't smile or say anything positive, he just frowned, tugged at his tie, and went into his office, slamming the door behind him. Looking back, that should have been my first warning. The pay period came and went, and I checked my bank account. The base salary was there, but the commission was missing. I told myself it was just a processing delay, especially for a deal of this size. I waited another 2 weeks. Still nothing. I walked down to the HR office to talk to Lisa, the HR manager. She's a nice person but has always been wary of speaking up. She's like a mouse in a world full of cats, constantly looking out for the next threat. "Hey, Lisa," I said, leaning on her doorframe. "There seems to be a problem with my commission for the pharma project. It's been over a month." Lisa didn't look up from her computer. She just kept typing, her shoulders hunched. "You need to talk to Ryan, Diane," she said in a low voice. "Ryan? Why?" I asked. "It's a payroll issue." She then looked up at me, and I saw real pity in her eyes. Ryan put a hold on it. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I walked back to my desk, aligned my notebook and pen, and then headed to Ryan's office. The door was open, and he was on the phone, laughing. He saw me, held up a finger, and took his sweet time finishing his call, clearly trying to show his power. He hung up and swiveled his chair towards me. "Diane, what can I do for you?" I said, "The commission for the pharma deal. Lisa says you put a hold on it." He leaned back in his chair, clasping his hands behind his head. "Yeah, we need to discuss that. There's an issue with the calculation. The private equity guys upstairs have been going over old contracts. Yours is an old-style contract, Diane. The accelerator clause is no longer viable. It's a mistake in the original drafting. We'll pay you a flat 2% commission instead." I was stunned. I quickly did the math in my head. 2% of $1. $28 million was only about $25,600. He was trying to cut my pay in half. "You can't do that," I said firmly. "I signed this deal based on the 4% commission. I put in a lot of hard work, and the contract has been honored for years." Ryan sighed, as if I were a difficult child. "Diane, the company is restructuring. We need team players. If we pay you that $51,000, we have to cut elsewhere, maybe lay off some support staff. You don't want that on your conscience, do you?" It was such an obvious lie that I was furious. But I thought about Caleb's tuition bill sitting on my desk. I said, "I want what I've earned, Ryan. I have a signed contract." His face darkened, and the fake friendliness was gone. "We'll see. I'll take it up with the higher-ups," he said and dismissed me with a wave of his hand. I went back to work, but my mind was in turmoil. I spent the next few days in a cloud of anxiety. I dug out my copy of the employment contract from my home filing cabinet and read it carefully. The language was clear. The accelerator clause was valid as soon as the sales exceeded $1 million. On a Thursday afternoon, I got an urgent email from HR, CCing Ryan. The subject was contract amendment. I was asked to go to the conference room immediately. I grabbed my notebook and my pen, and as I walked down the hallway, the smell of the copy machine's ozone was strong, stinging my nostrils. It was like a warning. When I entered the conference room, Ryan was there, along with Lisa and a lawyer I'd never seen before, a man in a charcoal gray suit. Ryan didn't offer me a seat. "Sit down, Diane," he said. I sat, placed my notebook on the table, and aligned it with the edge. I took out my pen and set it parallel to the notebook. Ryan pushed a document towards me. "We've reviewed your situation. This is an agreement to change your compensation plan. We're standardizing your commission to 2% to correct the error in your old contract." I asked, "And if I don't sign it?" Ryan smiled, but it was a cold smile. "Then we'll terminate your employment for insubordination. If we fire you, you'll get no commission at all, and we'll fight your unemployment claim. You're an expensive liability, Diane. Sign the waiver and stop acting like you're entitled to that money." I looked at the paper. It was an ultimatum. Sign away $25,600 or lose my job and the entire $51,200. They knew about my mortgage and Caleb's school. They were using my life against me. The lawyer checked his watch impatiently, and Lisa shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "This is illegal," I said softly. The lawyer spoke up in a dry, monotone voice, "It's at-will employment. We can change the terms at any time. You can either accept the new terms or resign." I was trapped. I was 48 years old, and finding a new job in this market with a termination on my record would be a nightmare. But I couldn't just give up. "I need to read it," I said. Ryan rolled his eyes. "It's just standard text. Sign it." I replied, "I read everything I sign. It's how I do business." As I started reading, the room was silent except for the hum of the ventilation system and Ryan tugging at his tie. The document was titled Compensation Adjustment and Waiver of Claims. It was a terrible agreement, stating that I accepted the previous commission rate was a mistake and that I waived my right to sue for back pay. When I reached the bottom of the page, there was a small section for employee remarks, followed by the signature line. An idea sparked in my mind. Ryan was checking his phone, the lawyer was looking out the window, and Lisa was staring at her shoes. They weren't watching me closely. I took my pen, and with a steady hand, I wrote a single sentence in the remarks section. It was a sentence that changed the whole meaning of the agreement. Then, below that, I signed my name, Diane L. Harris. I capped my pen. The click was loud in the silent room. "Done?" Ryan asked. "Done," I said and slid the paper back across the table. Ryan didn't even glance at the text, he just saw the signature, smirked, and snatched the paper up. "See? That wasn't so hard. Lisa, file this and process her 2% commission. Diane, get back to work." He walked out of the room without looking back. 2 days later, a deposit of $25,600 hit my account. It was less than half of what I was owed. I paid the urgent bills and sent a check to the medical school for Caleb. I continued to work at the office, acting like nothing had happened. Ryan would pass by my desk and make snide remarks, like, "Glad you're being a team player, Diane." I pretended to ignore him, but inside, I was waiting for the right time. I knew that Lisa, in her rush, had left the original document on the copier for a few minutes. I quickly made a photocopy of it. The smell of ozone from the copy machine became my symbol of hope. I waited for 2 weeks, making sure the pay cycle was over and the transaction was a permanent record. I wanted them to feel secure. One Tuesday morning, I walked into the office, but I didn't go to my cubicle. I went to the break room, poured myself a cup of the awful vending machine coffee, and then walked straight to Ryan's office. He was sitting at his desk, feet up, reading a business magazine. "Ryan," I said. He looked up, annoyed. "What now?" "I'm busy." I said, "I'm resigning, effective immediately." He laughed. "Okay. Don't expect a severance package. You quit, you get nothing." I replied, "I don't need a package. I just want my remaining commission. He frowned. What remaining commission? You signed the agreement and got your 2%. I said, I did sign it, but I think you should read it again. He snapped, I don't need to read it. I said calmly, the lawyer drafted it, but I added an addendum, and you accepted it when you processed the payment. Ryan's face turned red. I didn't accept anything. I explained, you countersigned the file copy and processed the payment based on it. That means you accepted the terms. He shouted, get out before I call security. I said, I'm leaving, but I'll send a demand letter for the remaining balance and penalty fees. He spat, you're delusional. As I packed my things, I could hear Ryan shouting for Lisa to bring him my file. I walked to the elevator, feeling a strange sense of lightness. I knew what would happen next. When he read the addendum, he'd realize his mistake. About an hour later, my phone rang. It was the lawyer. His voice was tense. Ms. Harris, we've reviewed the signed document. There seems to be an irregularity. I said, there's no irregularity. It's in the remarks section. You overlooked my addendum. Your client accepted the contract by making the payment and keeping me employed for 2 weeks under these terms. That's contract performance. There was a long silence. Then he asked, what do you want? I said, I want you to honor the full agreement. The pharmaceutical deal wasn't just a normal commercial project, it involved government grants for environmental upgrades. To get those grants, Airscape Solutions had to certify that all labor practices and compensation structures met federal standards. By illegally reducing my commission, they had committed grant fraud. The sentence I added to the contract was the key that unlocked their fraud. The next day, I received a cease and desist letter from the company. They were claiming fraud on my part and threatening to sue me for the $25,600 they'd paid. I read the letter, aligned it with the edge of my table, and smiled. They were missing the point. I decided to fight back. I picked up my phone and called the State Inspector General's Office for Environmental Projects. When the receptionist answered, I said, my name is Diane Harris. I'd like to report a violation of federal grant compliance regarding the Brightview Pharmaceutical Project, and I have the documents to prove it. Over the next few days, I focused on fixing the roof at home. I bought 3 buckets of roof sealant and a new ladder. Up on the roof, the air was fresh and free of the oppressive ozone smell from the office. It smelled of autumn leaves and the distant wood-burning stoves. My phone rang constantly, first the company lawyer, then Lisa, sounding panicked, and finally, Ryan, leaving a series of angry and desperate voicemails. On the 4th day, a black sedan with government plates pulled into my driveway. A woman in her 40s, wearing a practical black suit and carrying a briefcase, stepped out. Ms. Harris? She asked. That's me. I'm Agent Reed, from the Inspector General's office. You called about the grant compliance issue? I invited her in for a cup of coffee. We sat at my kitchen table, and I aligned the coasters and placed the sugar bowl in the middle. Agent Reed took out a notepad. You allege that Airscape Solutions is falsifying wage reports to meet federal grant requirements. That's a serious accusation. I replied, it is. The Brightview project is funded by the Green Industry Initiative. This initiative mandates that contractors pay fair wages and honor existing commission structures. By changing my commission retroactively, they've violated the grant terms. I showed her the photocopy of the signed document, and she read it carefully. When she reached the addendum, a small smile appeared on her face. They processed the payment based on this? She asked. Yes, and they didn't notice the addendum, I said. Agent Reed looked at me with new respect. I think I need to pay a visit to your former employer. Would you be willing to come in for a deposition? I said, I'd be happy to. Actually, I think it might help if I'm there to identify the people involved. We drove to the skyscraper in her car. Walking back into the building felt like entering a different world. The receptionist's eyes widened when she saw me. Agent Reid flashed her badge. "No calls," she said calmly. "We're going to the executive suite." In the main conference room, Ryan was there, along with the company lawyer and a senior partner in a very expensive suit. The room went silent when we entered. The partner barked, "Who are you? You can't just barge in here." Agent Reid placed her badge on the table. "Federal Inspector General's office." "And you know MS Harris." Ryan looked like he'd seen a ghost. His face was pale, and he was tugging at his tie so hard it was almost choking him. The lawyer stood up and said, "We've sent a cease and desist letter to this former employee.